My sister twisted my arm so hard I couldn't move my fingers. My hand went limp, like the wires had been cut. My dad clapped. My mom smirked. My sister leaned in and whispered, "Stop being a baby." And every guest at our backyard barbecue? They laughed. I was 32 years old. And I thought this was normal. Until a stranger dropped her plate and said two words that changed everything. "Call 911. Hi, my name is Marisol. And that Sunday afternoon is tattooed on my bones. The smell of grilled meat mixing with cheap cologne. The sound of ice clinking in wine glasses. And the same dread curling in my stomach that I always felt walking into one of my parents' perfect family gatherings. What I didn't know then was that one MRI scan would reveal something darker than I, or anyone, could imagine. But the scan wasn't the real shock. The real shock was who already knew. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where are you? Drop a comment below. Because I promise you'll want to hear what that MRI revealed. My family's secret was darker than anyone imagined. I'd just clocked out from another 10-hour shift at the store. My faded retail uniform sticking to my skin in the Texas heat. I didn't even have time to change. Family gatherings weren't optional in my father's world. If you skipped one, you might as well sign your own disownment papers. I drove straight there. Steering wheel hot under my hands. Chest tight with that same old dread. I already knew the role I'd play. Today's punchline. The backyard was picture perfect. Neatly trimmed lawn. A grill smoking. Neighbors balancing paper plates. My parents loved showing off the image of a happy family. That's all it ever was. An image. Deline spotted me first. Her sundress crisp. Nails gleaming in a shade that probably cost more than my whole outfit. Her smile, I knew that smile. It was the warning before the storm. "Well, look who finally showed up," she called. Loud enough to cut through the laughter. "Still rocking that glamorous retail uniform, huh?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some amused. Some nervous. My cheeks burned. I forced a smile, clutching a cup of lemonade, trying to find a quiet corner. But she followed. "You should thank me, Mari. At least now you're providing the entertainment." Her voice dripped with that sweet, poisonous tone. Before I could step away, her fingers clamped around my arm. "Remember when we used to play this game?" "Don't, Deline." My voice shook. She twisted. Sharp pain shot up my arm, stealing my breath. "Deline, stop." She laughed, turning to the crowd. So sensitive, as always. More laughter. My father clapped like he was at a ball game. She needed that. Might teach her not to talk back. My mother didn't even look up from her wine. Useless girl. Always causing trouble. And there it was. That familiar cocktail of pain and humiliation. The kind that made you want to scream, but also made you believe no one would care if you did. Because in my family, hurt was entertainment. And if you couldn't take a joke, you deserved to be the joke. But this time, someone in the crowd wasn't laughing. A young woman near the patio dropped her paper plate. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "Call 911, she said. Her voice cut through the laughter like a blade. The paramedic arrived minutes later. Took one look at my arm. Then whispered to his partner. "Call the police." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a twisted arm. This was about a family secret I'd been living under for decades. I woke up the next morning with the ache still deep in my arm. But the memory of Sierra's voice stayed with me even stronger. "You're not overreacting. Don't let them convince you otherwise." The swelling had gotten worse overnight. My fingers stiff and useless. Every movement sent pain shooting up to my shoulder. The kind that made you grit your teeth just to breathe. I thought about calling in sick. Just once. But I could already hear my father's voice in my head. Lazy. Useless. always looking for an excuse. So I wrapped my arm in an old scarf, shoved it close to my side, and caught the bus to work. Houston's air was heavy. Sticky. I kept my head down the whole ride, hoping no one would notice how I cradled my arm. The store was quiet for a Monday morning. I tried to lose myself in folding sweaters and straightening hangers, pretending the numbness creeping down my fingers was nothing. But by noon, the tingling had turned to a cold, foreign heaviness. I kept flexing my hand, willing it to move, willing it to prove I still had control. It barely responded. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I let those go straight to voicemail. But something in me, a mix of dread and curiosity, made me swipe. Marisol Vega? The voice was calm, deliberate. This is Detective Radcliffe. I was at your parents' place last night after the paramedics came. I'd like to ask you a few questions. My chest tightened. No one had ever called me after one of these incidents. What happened in my family stayed in my family. Always. Can we talk after your shift? He asked. I hesitated, scanning the store for some excuse, some way to slip out. But then I heard Sierra's voice in my head. You're not overreacting. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I said yes. The hours dragged like wet clothes on a line. By the time I clocked out, my stomach was twisted in knots. He was waiting outside the store. Plain clothes, badge clipped to his belt, eyes that didn't flinch when they met mine. He offered to walk me to a cafe down the block. We sat in a corner booth, my sling resting awkwardly against the table, the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. I watched the party footage, he said without preamble. Multiple guests recorded your sister twisting your arm. Your parents didn't intervene. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Marisol, has this happened before? I stared at my coffee, watching the cream swirl into jagged clouds. My throat felt tight. Since we were kids, I whispered. They always said I was too sensitive, that I needed to toughen up. He nodded slowly, jotting something down in a small notepad. You know, untreated fractures can leave permanent damage. Sometimes it's irreversible. Permanent. The word dropped into my chest like a stone, rippling through every memory of scraped knees and twisted wrists. I thought of birthdays that ended in tears, of Deline's smug smile when I cried, of my father clapping like it was a show. I wanted to tell him everything, but decades of silence don't break easily. The habit of swallowing words is hard to unlearn. Radcliffe didn't push. He let the pause hang between us, his gaze steady but patient. If you choose to tell me more, we can act. If you don't, the pattern will keep repeating. His voice lowered, just enough to cut through the noise in my head. And next time, it could be worse. Something in the way he said worse made my pulse quicken. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness grounding me. He slid his card across the table. Think about it. Call me anytime. I slipped the card into my pocket, my fingers tracing the embossed letters like they might burn me. I didn't know it then, but meeting him was the first step toward tearing open a truth my family had spent decades burying. And the next step? It would shatter every lie they'd ever told about me. The next day, my arm felt like it was on fire. Every heartbeat sent a sharp, electric pulse up to my shoulder. The scarf I'd wrapped it in was no match for the deep, throbbing ache that had kept me awake most of the night. By mid-morning, I decided to call in sick, not because I couldn't push through the pain, God knows I'd done that before. Just enough to cut through the noise in my head. And next time, it could be worse. Something in the way he said worse made my pulse quicken. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness grounding me. He slid his card across the table. Think about it. Call me anytime. I slipped the card into my pocket, my fingers tracing the embossed letters like they might burn me. I didn't know it then, but meeting him was the first step toward tearing open a truth my family had spent decades burying. And the next step? It would shatter every lie they'd ever told about me. The next day, my arm felt like it was on fire. Every heartbeat sent a sharp, electric pulse up to my shoulder. The scarf I'd wrapped it in was no match for the deep, throbbing ache that had kept me awake most of the night. By mid-morning, I decided to call in sick. Not because I couldn't push through the pain, God knows I'd done that before, but because something felt different this time. Wrong. I could barely grip my toothbrush. Even the weight of a coffee mug felt like it might snap me in half. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at Detective Radcliffe's card. My thumb traced the raised print. My mind replayed the cafe conversation over and over. His calm, steady voice saying permanent damage. His eyes steady when he asked if this had happened before. By 11 a.m., I'd made up my mind. I dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. Marisol? Yes. I want to do the MRI. He didn't sound surprised. Good. I'll call Houston General and get it set up. Can you be there in an hour? When I arrived, the hospital's white walls and antiseptic smell hit me like a wave. The fluorescent lights made everything too bright. Too sharp. A nurse guided me into a small room. Handed me a gown. Helped me secure my arm. Dr. Williams, the neurosurgeon, introduced himself with a firm handshake. We'll take some images. See exactly what's going on in there. His tone was reassuring. But there was a shadow in his eyes I didn't like. The MRI machine hummed like a giant mechanical bee. The sound filled my head as I lay perfectly still. My mind a mess of dread and fragile hope. I tried to picture the results being normal. Something easy to fix. But my gut wouldn't let me believe it. When it was over, they wheeled me into a dim consultation room. Dr. Williams returned with another doctor, Patterson, I think. The two of them stood side by side, looking at the monitor. This, Dr. Williams began, pointing with a pen, is the fracture you sustained yesterday. It's bad, but treatable. He clicked to another image. These, however, these are older injuries. Months. Maybe years old. Never treated. They've healed unevenly. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Older? I asked. My voice sounded too small even to me. He nodded slowly. Yes. Several breaks and microfractures. All consistent with twisting or blunt force. Some could have caused permanent nerve damage. Before I could process that, the door swung open. My father's voice filled the room like smoke. She's always been clumsy, he snapped. Fell off her bike. Tripped on stairs. She bruises like a peach. My mother followed. Arms folded tight. And she exaggerates everything. You're wasting your time. Dr. Patterson's expression hardened. But he didn't address them. Instead, he looked at me. Marisol. Injuries like these don't just happen by accident. Is there something you need to tell us? My throat tightened. Years of swallowed words sat heavy in my chest. I thought of Sierra. Of the party. Of the laughter. I thought of the little girl I used to be. Standing in the yard with scraped knees. Hearing the same dismissals. Yes, I whispered. Since we were kids. The silence that followed felt like the air had thickened. My father's face flushed red. My mother's lips pressed into a thin white line. Detective Radcliffe stepped into the room then. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. Thank you, Marisol, he said quietly. That's all we needed. Something shifted in my chest. Fear. Relief. Grief. Twisting together until I couldn't tell them apart. And then Dr. Williams added, his voice calm but firm. Marisol, this wasn't your fault. And it ends now. But little did I know, my sister wasn't finished yet. Her next move would be the cruelest one. By the time the sun slid behind the Houston skyline, the Vega house was glowing under the flash of red and blue lights. 2 squad cars idled out front. Radios crackling. Neighbors leaned against their fences. Phones half-raised. Whispering behind their hands. I stood on the sidewalk beside Detective Radcliffe. My arm still in a sling. The hospital band scratchy against my wrist. The air smelled faintly of barbecue from someone's backyard, mixing strangely with the metallic tang of tension. The front door burst open before the officers could knock. My father filled the doorway. Face flushed. Jaw tight. "You have no right to bring the police here," he bellowed, his voice carrying down the street. My mother appeared behind him. Her jacket immaculate. Her chin high, like she was greeting paparazzi instead of cops. "This is harassment," she declared to the growing audience of neighbors. "Our daughter is trying to destroy us." Radcliffe didn't flinch. "We have medical evidence and video footage of an assault. We're here to execute a lawful arrest." That's when she appeared. Deline. She didn't storm in or shout like my father. No, she strolled into the living room with a folder tucked under her arm. Lips curved into that practiced smirk. The one that had haunted me since childhood. "Detective," she said smoothly. "Before you embarrass yourself, you might want to see what Marisol's been hiding." She placed the folder on the table with a sharp thud. Inside, photocopied medical notes. Typed statements from supposed coworkers. Even a psychologist's report claiming I was unstable and prone to exaggeration. My stomach dropped. Each page was like a match struck under the foundation I'd been building all day. "This is who you're protecting," Deline said, leaning back with satisfaction. "She's been manipulating you from the start." For a heartbeat, the room felt like it tilted. My father's chest swelled with smug triumph. My mother's eyes glittered with vindication. They thought this was checkmate. Radcliffe flipped through the folder slowly. His face gave away nothing. When he closed it, the silence was sharp enough to cut. "Interesting," he said evenly. "But irrelevant. These don't change the MRI scans showing multiple untreated fractures over several years." Before they could respond, he signaled to an officer. A portable screen flickered to life. And the party footage began to play. There it was. The moment Deline twisted my arm. Guests laughing. My father clapping. My mother sipping wine without a glance in my direction. Then me, doubling over. Clutching my hand. Face twisted in pain. The room shifted. My mother's smile faltered. My father's fists clenched at his sides. Deline's smirk melted into something sharper: panic. Radcliffe's voice stayed steady. "This isn't hearsay. This is evidence." I stood still. My sling heavy at my side. Sierra's words echoed in my mind. "The truth is enough." An officer stepped forward. "Deline Vega," he said. "You're under arrest for aggravated assault." The click of the cuffs was louder than the murmurs outside. Deline's eyes locked on mine. Not with guilt. With a promise. This wasn't over. As they led her out past the flashing lights, I felt something unfamiliar take root in my chest. Not joy. Not victory. Something quieter. The first breath of freedom. But standing there, with neighbors' eyes on me and my parents' glares burning into my skin, I knew one thing. This battle was only beginning. Because the next fight wouldn't be in our backyard. It would be in court. 2 years later, the echoes of that night still found me sometimes. But now they sounded different. Softer. Like reminders instead of shackles. The afternoon sun slid through the blinds of my small Houston apartment, striping the living room floor in gold. My tea steamed beside me. The folded hospital wristband resting nearby. I'd kept it. Not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that the truth had been seen. Proof that I had survived. A soft knock on the door. Sierra's voice floated in, light and familiar. Brought coffee. And yes, I remembered the muffins. When she stepped in, the smell of roasted beans filled the room. We sat together at the table. The hum of the city outside a gentle backdrop. Her laughter, warm, unhurried, was a stark contrast to the kind I grew up with, where every chuckle felt like it was aimed at me. She caught me staring off. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. Just thinking about how far we've come." And it was true. These days, I worked as a patient advocate at Houston General. Standing beside people who'd been told their pain was all in their head. I listened. I believed. I fought for them, the way no one had fought for me back then. Sometimes the old voices tried to creep back. My father's "walk it off." My mother's "stop being a baby." But they no longer owned me. That night in the backyard didn't just break me. It rebuilt me. I am not dramatic. I am not useless. I am enough. I always was. So if you're listening to this, and someone's made you doubt your own pain, hear me. You don't have to prove it to deserve help. Your pain is real. Your story matters. And the people who dismiss you? They don't get to write your ending. If this story hits something in you, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are right now. Tell me your story. And if you've ever been told you were too sensitive, I promise you this. You're not too much. They were just too little. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories about breaking free. About finding your voice. About finally being believed. Because strength isn't staying silent. Strength is finally speaking. And you deserve to be heard.